Hello again, this is Victor James, author of The Megacosm, and before we begin the video, I want to give a quick word and a shout out to all those who purchased my novel at the mark. We finally got this novel back to the low 400s in the 2-hour mystery category, which is awesome, but we never seem to get over that hump. Every time we get to the 400s, another 2-hour mystery is loaded and it climbs right back up the charts again. So I would love to get this story down into the double digits so we can just threaten that bestseller category in the 2-hour mysteries. So if you have 99 cents to spare, give the mark a chance. It's a story in the Megacosm that pits a Green Beret against an Army Ranger, and it's as masculine and as violent as you would expect. So let's get the mark over that hump and onto that bestseller category. Now, onto the video. If there was one thing that anyone has to say was a negative in the classic Civil War storyline by Mark Millar, it was this: that this was not the New Warriors. For those who may have forgotten about the Civil War storyline because it was in 2006 when it came out, it was the New Warriors led by Speedball who were the catalyst for the Marvel Civil War, when the reality show took a turn for the worse and their apprehension of Nitro caused a disaster. And the one complaint from us old heads was that this wasn't how the New Warriors would act, because at this point in their careers they were actually very seasoned heroes. This wasn't a new team of amateurs in Civil War, but had veterans like Speedball, Night Thrasher, and Namorito on their team, who had honestly been through fire by this point, so it was odd for them to be so sloppy. Case in point, their Days in the Future Present storyline. Now I'm focused on this storyline first because there are so many New Warrior stories by Fabian Nicieza to highlight that I really want to give them the proper due in separate videos, but this was one of my favorites, and it truly highlights just how seasoned the New Warriors were by this point in their career. Days of Future Present was of course a play on the classic X-Men Days of Futures Past, which is still talked about to this day, but this New Warriors tale is all but forgotten. And it has pretty much the same premise, where our heroes in a dystopian future where they struggle against an oppressive regime. But there's a twist, as they fight against a group of evil Egyptian Avengers working for the United States of Assyria. And this Avengers group consists of Horus, who was a stand-in for Thor, Captain Assyria for Captain America, Spectre for Vision, and Storm was, well, Storm, and Nova, who was a new warrior in our timeline. And these Assyrian Avengers are dangerous and deadly, as we see immediately when Wolverine is callously killed by Horus when he helps to cover the escape of our heroes. This was a harrowing opening to the story that closely follows the classic X-Men storyline, but they at least had the good graces to save it to issue 2 of that series. And how did things get so bad for this timeline, you may ask? Well, it begins with the Sphinx, who was actually the wizard that battled Moses, which is sort of biblical, but in the Bible there were actually 2 wizards, Janus and Jambres, and both threw down their staffs to become snakes, but both were swallowed whole by Moses the snake. But in this timeline, the wizard snake won, and he gained fame and changed the timeline. The wizard was given the Cawstone by a peasant woman who had discovered it during a sandstorm. The Sphinx made the peasant woman his wife, and the Cawstone allowed the Sphinx to alter reality, which he did, and he created his version of the USA. But there was still strife in the world, which led to 2 world wars, and the Sphinx was only able to save most of his country from the nuclear fallout. But the mental and physical toll of leadership was just too much for the Sphinx, and he gave the Cawstone to his wife, who was actually the villain of the story. She brought about the age of the superheroes, who were a mix of heroes that we know and others who were like given this cool Egyptian twist. And we learned that this was actually the woman who had changed the real world into the dimensive reality that they are facing. And a group of mutants struggle against the new Sphinx's oppression, including our heroes and the New Warriors. The mission we saw at the beginning of the issue was to instill plans that would allow them to take down her mutant detection shield around the city so they can face her. But she knows they're coming. The Sphinx is actually quite vulnerable for our main villain. She's worried and scared about the mutants that are about to breach her shield. Eventually the mutants are able to breach her powerful shield and fight the Avengers, and it's an eclectic strike force with a mix of New Warriors, X-Men, and villains we know in our timeline like Sebastian Shaw and the Juggernaut. Having been shown the truth earlier, Nova begins to recognize his old teammates and turns on the Avengers. The Sphinx makes her final stand, and it's as brutal as you might imagine, as she goes about murdering many of the mutants attacking her. All the while, Night Thrasher was working in the background, and he had found out that Sphinx's true weakness was in her ever-present cat, which was a tie and a symbol of her love to the original Sphinx. Using the cat as bait, she was forced to return reality back to its true timeline. And when it was over, the New Warriors didn't just wake up in bed and not remember. No, they actually remember their old lives in that false reality. The New Warriors had lived an entire lifetime in a false dystopian reality and retained those memories when it was fixed. This just adds to the argument that they were too experienced and too seasoned to be the cause of the Civil War. And yes, before anyone asks, Speedball was there too, he just wasn't superpowered. But this isn't an indictment of Civil War. I absolutely love that storyline and was there at the comic shop every week when the new issues came out. I even read the tie-ins, which is very unusual for me. I was completely hooked. Mark Millar is a genius, and I get why he used the New Warriors as a team. I just wish that they didn't include the actual New Warriors, who had saved the world and reality far too many times. Anyway, you tell me what you think in the comments. Have you read this New Warriors story? Did you like it or hate it? I'm planning on highlighting more New Warrior stories because I realized that their stories actually had a profound effect on what I write, and I want more people to read their classic stories. Anyway, that's all I have to say right now. Pick up the Mark for 99 cents. God bless you and keep you. That's it, I'm done.